The Trident submarines of Britain's nuclear deterrent are hidden in the hills of western Scotland. Their home, Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde at Faslane. The rest of Britain's nuclear-powered submarines are to be relocated here too, so Faslane is strategically important. It is to be Britain's sole operating base for the nuclear submarine fleet. We've discovered that Faslane has serious nuclear safety problems. Under the Freedom of Information Act, we've obtained secret Navy reports and letters that reveal previously unknown leaks of radioactive material from the base that have seriously alarmed nuclear regulators.
We need to protect the environment of Scotland and the people of the area and across the country.
If this was a nuclear power station, it would be shut down.
For months, defence ministers have refused to end speculation that the submarine base at Devonport in Plymouth is to be closed. But a document about the future of Faslane that Channel 4 News has obtained reveals all classes of submarine will be base-ported at Faslane at Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde. There's a timetable too. 3 submarines to move by 2012, the remaining 4 to stay at Devonport until they're decommissioned in 2015.
The movement of the operational submarines or the surface ships out of this naval base will knock a whacking great hole in our local economy. What is frustrating is that this is not the Navy's fault. We've no difficulty with the Navy here. It appears to be a reluctance by the Ministry of Defence to make a true announcement of the situation.
The MOD insists the future of Devonport is secure and no decision has yet been made. These, it says, are just working assumptions to shape long-term planning about an area of Faslane's activity that we now know is causing serious concern. The nuclear-powered submarines based at Faslane produce low-level radioactive waste that is treated, then piped into the lock to dispose of it. The amounts are controlled. The Navy has agreed to do it according to the rules for civilian nuclear sites. But now we know the Navy has broken those rules, a secret kept from those who use the lock. For the first time, we can reveal details of recent accidents where untreated radioactive waste leaked into the water by mistake. August 2007, radioactive liquid being piped from HMS Superb spills into the lock. It is 6 days before the base informs the regulator responsible for Scotland's environment, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, or SEPA. SEPA writes to the base commander. Radioactive waste management was inadequate. This should be taken as a final warning. The MOD replies they take the incident very seriously and have tightened procedures. But just 5 months later, it happens again. Radioactive liquid waste again leaks into the lock by mistake, this time from HMS Torbay. To SEPA's later concern, they discover the workers had failed to recognise their mistakes had caused a nuclear accident. The Ministry of Defence told us the discharges had no measurable or quantifiable environmental consequence. We showed the documents we'd obtained to a respected nuclear engineer who has advised the MOD on nuclear submarine safety. Was the amount involved of itself dangerous?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, actually, because as SEPA point out, no one sampled the discharge. And that means SEPA doesn't know how much radioactivity was discharged, and it doesn't know how to work out the risk to the public.
Though Scotland's environmental regulator, SEPA, agrees the radiation released was small, it was still alarmed.
It is not acceptable simply to say that these incidents were minor. We need to make sure that they have systems to prevent any incident happening so that we don't have to worry about whether the potential consequences are serious or not.
The trouble is, all the systems that are in place are purely voluntary. SEPA is unable to bring the full force of the law down onto the base because Faslane is exempt from the environmental radiation legislation that SEPA enforces. All it could do in its letters was plead with the base commander to take the matters seriously. Your hands are tied. You can't police it. You can't enforce your enforcement notice, can you?
Ultimately, no, we can't. But we have to be reassured that the base commander believes that he is operating and is capable of operating with the equivalent sense of rigour that he would have were he being regulated in the civilian sector.
SEPA's ultimate sanction on a civilian nuclear site is to order work to stop, to shut it down. But Faslane is a military site, exempt from civilian radiation laws. If this had been a civilian site, what would you have done?
With a civilian operator, we would have been having extremely robust conversations about prohibiting further action until we could see very clear demonstrations of systems and training that would prevent this ever happening again.
Would you have considered closing it down?
The prohibition notice type approach would effectively have been that.
For SEPA to say so clearly that if it were a civilian facility, it would have considered shutting down Faslane is an indication of its frustration, born of its knowledge of the base's past. These are not isolated incidents. Faslane has a long history of unauthorised radioactive discharges stretching back to the 1980s. From our investigations, we now know that there have been over 40 radiation leaks into the lock. It seems, though, from the documents we've obtained, that the Ministry of Defence has finally realised that goodwill is running out, and they must do something about nuclear safety at Faslane. Last year, the MOD ordered a secret review into how radioactive waste at Faslane was processed, stored and disposed of. This is it, and it makes alarming reading. Across the board, it admits the base had demonstrably failed to meet the radiation standards it had agreed to. It reveals one accident was the result of a procedure not being followed correctly. Such behaviour, it says, a recurring theme, a cultural issue the base must address. Levels of staffing and training, it concludes, are not adequate. Faslane's infrastructure for radioactive waste management is in bad shape too, and potentially hazardous. The report says a build-up of solid radioactive waste in tanks is a significant radiation hazard. There is inadequate maintenance of pipes that carry the radioactive liquid waste from the submarines around the site. And worryingly, it reveals they don't always know where they are. No drawings exist of where some pipes run.
That's astonishing to say that you can run a nuclear plant with risk and not know where the plant is. I mean, there's sections of pipework they can't get to. It's astonishing.
No one from the Naval Base or the Ministry of Defence would be interviewed, but the MOD told us that as a result of the review, an improvement plan is currently underway to ensure modern standards and best practice at the base. But Scotland now has its own government that wants to rid Scotland of nuclear weapons, led by a First Minister who has openly backed mass protest at Faslane.
It is totally horrifying. We have now learned that we have had nuclear leaks on the Clyde for years. It's not just one case, it's a whole series. And the MOD should be answerable to the public authorities that regulate that, in this case SEPA in Scotland. It has not done that. It thinks it's above the law. That is not acceptable.
Faslane believes politics won't affect its plans to improve radioactive waste handling at the base, but the confirmation that all Britain's nuclear submarines are to be based there means the Ministry of Defence must do more to convince its critics the recent mismanagement that we've uncovered is a thing of the past.
Julian. Okay, so